Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Amplify Speakers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Sund, and on today's session, I'm extremely excited to introduce our next guest. Today's guest is Eric Termuende. Eric is an award-winning speaker on leadership, workplace culture, and the future of work. He's also the author of Rethink Work. His research into the DNA of top-performing workplaces helps leaders build resilient, high-performing teams and cultures that thrive in times of change. He has worked with global brands like Amazon, Coca-Cola, IBM, Zoom, and Toyota, and his insights have been featured in Forbes, Fast Company, and Inc. Eric, welcome to the podcast.
Chris, great to be here. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while and excited to see what we can dig up today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for those that don't know much about you, I'd love to maybe give a little history lesson. What got you from where you are today to now helping some of the biggest companies in the world?
I graduated out of the University of Calgary in Alberta, Canada, with no job. My co-founder and I were trying to figure out what was going on in the workplace. It didn't help that oil was like $35 a barrel in an oil town, but we found that tenure for millennials or this next generation of work was shorter than it had ever been before. Job satisfaction was not high. And just it seemed to be a bit of a transformation that was happening in the workplace. And so we kind of set out to figure it out. How can organizations ultimately attract and retain at the time? At the time, we were talking about a millennial workforce, the next generation of work. And so we surveyed tens of thousands of people, primarily through industry associations that we worked with, to put numbers behind the employee experience. And what we were helping these industry associations do is allow their membership to articulate their culture a little bit differently. So let's just take an industry example. Let's just take Amplify. Let's take Executive Speakers Bureau. Let's take Premier Speakers Bureau. Everyone's doing similar work, very well, I might add. But the culture is very different from place to place to place. There's not a best culture, but there's a best culture for Chris. There's a best culture for Angela. There's a best culture for Sean Hanks. And if you can articulate that well and differentiate the experience from each other, then you're going to be able to attract the right people, keep them longer, and allow for a higher performing team. And that's what we were doing. We would say that you're probably not you're probably competing for skills, but you're probably not competing for talent. So what do you mean? What do you mean by that? Any organization might have an accountant or a bookkeeper or an HR manager or an IT director, but you could be an IT director for Starbucks or for a golf course or for a boutique publishing company or for a big four, firm. The job you do is very similar, but the life that you get to live, the values, the people, they're all different. And if you can articulate that differently and help our leaders tell that story better and live those values better, work ideally is not something that we have to do. It's something that we get to do.
That
So that's what we were focused on. That was over the past, probably 10 or 12 years now. I've been on about 600 stages, working with some great companies around the world. I wrote my book a few years ago called Rethink Work, and the idea behind Rethink Work is that if we can change the way that we attract and retain talent, ultimately build teams, that work isn't something that we have to do, it's something we get to do with people we enjoy doing it with. And so the big goal was to remove that negative connotation associated with work. I mean, we hear it all the time. We drag our feet to work on Monday, Wednesday's hump day, and Friday we skip out of the office and into the weekend. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but we thought there was room to tweak the language around it.
Yeah, what a great concept. Rethinking work and getting to go to work versus feeling like you have to. Now, for some professions, they may be going, how do I get to go to work? I work in housekeeping. I work in dietary. I work in this industry, and I'm not working for what company seems like great. What would you say to that company and those individuals that are trying to find that purpose, that perspective?
Purpose can come from many places, and I think we often kind of get confused with the sort of save the planet or save the whales sort of purpose. If you're working for PETA or the World Wildlife Foundation, purpose is super obvious. If you're working for a nonprofit or a soup kitchen, it's super obvious. But if you're working as an accountant, where's the obvious purpose? I mean, sure, there's purpose if you want to look for it, but I found that purpose can be in the sense of accomplishment that we have. Purpose can be from the people that we get to do our work with. And purpose can be as a result of the life that we get to live as a result of the work that we get to do too. I mean, look, I think it's this year, 2026. If it's not out yet, it was for 2025 and 2024 and 2023. But the first or second best place to work in the country of the United States of employers over 10,000 people was the Hilton hotel chain. Now, you've got people who are making up rooms, people who are valets, people who are working in the restaurants, people working at the front desk. Purpose can come from service. Purpose can come from accomplishment. Purpose can come from mastery. If you're making, 20 beds a day and cleaning 20 rooms a day, every day you come to work, you could master that job. And gosh, that would feel wonderful to do. I have yet to master anything I've started, but I can only imagine how great that would feel.
Yeah, I really love the way you're framing that and the way you look. So, one of the things I just want to say is I really believe the people, make or break any company, who you're bringing in and how they behave. And so you've worked with a lot of large companies and who are probably, hate to say it, probably more likely to have their values and purpose figured out. But have you found somewhere like, no, they don't have it, or their employees don't even know what they are?
Well, okay, yes. I'm not gonna point fingers or name names. What I will tell you, and the numbers are they're rough numbers, so don't quote me on this. But I did this little I call them napkin exercises, which just allows me to say something scientific without having any sort of basis at all. I just this little napkin exercise where I took the Fortune 100, okay, and I mapped out their 5 values. Okay, so maybe this will be even more fun. I've never done this before. What do you think, Chris? What do you think some of those values of the top 100 companies are? What might those be?
That's a good question. I'm gonna go with um, drive, integrity.
Bingo. Integrity. 40% of those 100 companies had integrity as one of their values. What else?
How about humble?
Maybe. Yeah.
I gotta be careful here. I'm naming off some of Patrick Lencioni's
Yeah. Yeah. But it's true.
meaning too, but
How about respect?
the
How about
respect was the next one.
communication? How about innovation or something like that? And I laugh because you say that these big organizations have got it figured out. In many cases, yeah, they've got it figured out in that they've spent a lot of money and they've got a lot of collateral and swag that says this stuff on it. But does that mean that it's actually embodied throughout the organization? I would actually flip the script and say, you go to an organization of 10 people, you go to a little restaurant, a mom and pop shop, if you go to a little tourism board where you get a bunch of little small companies in a small rural part of the country, and those people have their values figured out. They don't have it all pretty with decals on the big boardroom wall because they don't have a boardroom. But I could ask any member of that 10-person team what their values are at work, and they'd all say the same thing. And I bet you none of it would be integrity, honor, respect, communication, or drive.
Yeah.
What they would say is, here's how we do our work, Chris. We show up for each other, we have each other's backs, we trust each other, we get the job done, and we love serving the people that we serve. That's what they would say. And to me, that's what culture is. Culture is the lived experience at work. And if people can live the experience that they promote, there's no culture or integrity gap in that communication. And again, no fault necessarily to large organizations of 10 or 40 or 100,000 people. But it's really hard. If you got 100,000 snare drums and 200,000 drumsticks, it's really hard to get all those drums beaten at the same sort of pace. You get 10 people with 20 sticks, it's a lot easier.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. There's something you said there that you just casually went about it, but it was good enough that I would print it and probably put on a wall. And I'm
Was
gonna
it drive
put
or integrity or communication?
none of those. It
Nice.
was the culture is the experience you live at work. And I have never heard that saying before.
Oh, I love
And
to think that most of the times we try to overcomplicate definitions and things like that. And you say like toxic culture or thriving culture, whatever it is. I mean, whatever the lived experience at work is what your culture is. And in many cases, like we talked about with the work that we were doing earlier, sometimes, a good culture for you is a bad culture for me. And so like a universal best culture doesn't exist. Let me give you an example. Um, Real estate orgs, especially junior people. You get like a Colliers or a Cushman or an Avison Young or a CBRE or something like that. They'll routinely cut the bottom 10% of the performers, right? That's just how you stay competitive. Like that's part of the industry. That's part of the hustle, the drive, the grit. That's the identity of the industry. Do I want to work in that environment? Absolutely not. Does it work? Yeah, incredibly well. Incredibly well. You'll also get organizations to say, we're family. We're family. I say, I don't want to be part of your family. That sounds bad too. Like I want something like right in the middle of those things. I don't want to work for a family culture. That sounds awful. But I also don't want to work for a cutthroat, dog eat dog, grind, grit, hustle. Like that's not really me either. Like I don't mind transactional work. I think a lot of people don't mind transactional work. I think if, some people want to check in at 9, work hard, check out at 5, don't open their phone or their laptop or their computer again. Hey man, that's awesome. It's not for everyone, but that's the whole point of what I try to preach. Is like you don't have to be everything to everyone. You need to be exactly who you need to be to the people who will ultimately thrive in that environment.
yeah, I absolutely love that concept and what you're talking about. I think a lot just resonates with a lot of people.
When I'm up on stage, I want everyone. A couple things happen. Number one, I want everyone to feel like seen and heard, and number one, I want everyone path to continued success. Like for a long time, I talked about how to attract the next generation, and I think at the time, I was like in my 20s going up on stage talking about this stuff. And I think that most of my audiences expected me to say, get on Snapchat and TikTok and bend over backwards and adhere to the new world of work or get left behind. I hear those messages all the time. My message is actually the opposite. I would say double down on the things that you're really good at, on the working style and the environment that your people can thrive in, and forget the rest. Our goal is not to have 1,500 resumes stacked on our desk. Nobody has time to go through them. Our goal is to have 10, maybe high quality people that have self selected themselves to be a part of a culture that they already admire before they've even stepped in the door. When your values are the same 40% as everyone else, how do you know if you're a good fit or not? The reality is,
Yeah, that is. I like the idea of one, it's quality over quantity, but that is so much easier said than done. My other company, I work with workforce and recruiting, and I look at a lot of times companies' websites or what they post even for their job, or if I'm looking, what do I know about your company? Does it say your purpose or your values, or does your job description set out the exact same as everybody else's for the exact type of role?
do you want to know my easiest hack? If you're if so there's one that's proactive and one that's reactive. If you want to be proactive about this, start to showcase a day in the life of a person who's already in the role or the position of the position that you're hiring, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And if you're already in the recruitment process, have your prospective employee spend half a day off site at coffee shops or going wherever they want to go, just talking about the ins and outs of the job and the life that they get to live. Because I think today, especially, we're not signing up for just a job, we're signing up for a lifestyle. I mean, the job that we choose indicates the sports that we play, the travel that we embark on, the community and events that we are a part of or not a part of, the hours that we work, the social circles that we're a part of. If I'm let's just say recruiting to be a part of your company, I want to talk to one of or all of my prospective team members and say, look, gang, what am I signing up for? And you know what they're going to do? They're going to tell me. And we're going to mutually identify whether or not I'm a right fit. Because if I go and talk to 4 of the people that I'm going to be working with every day and they say, Chris, we spent some time with that Eric guy, that guy sucks. great. It saved you a ton of time, saved them a ton of headache, and it saved me the embarrassment of a bad fit. That probably, by the way, I would stick around in too long, because you think I'm going to tell my wife 2 weeks into the job that I'm going to quit and start the job search over again? And she's going to say, "No, you're not. Get back to work." And I'm going to say, "Yes, ma'am." um, so I just think that we're not interviewing for just skills and requirements. You definitely are as well, but you're interviewing for a lifestyle as well.
Yeah, it's a smart way of looking at interviewing. When people, what, we spend over 2,000 hours at work.
Yeah,
That's more than most people will be spending with their loved ones and friends in the
that's
course of a
sleeping.
year.
Yeah,
Yeah. So when you look at it that way, it's such a responsibility any employer has to make sure that we are giving them a lifestyle. We're giving them something like, yes, we're asking for a job, and we know there's a task that we want done and a purpose behind it, said position, but at the same time, it's a two-way street. If we want the best out of our people, then we have to make sure we're giving the best environment we can for them to do that.
and the best environment is best. Like, it's your best environment. That's it. It's not the best environment. It's your best environment, and then we can determine what that actually looks like.
Yeah, well said. I think and you said it really well earlier. There's so many different styles. I like to look at the
I think we should treat culture like cilantro. Like, do you love or hate cilantro? Because it's one or the other. You know, or like black licorice. Do you love or hate it?
I love it. I'm gonna be on the love category for both of those, but there's a
Okay.
lot of people on the
Wait a
opposite
second.
side.
Does pineapple belong on pizza?
No.
No, exactly. Like, anyone who thinks it does is like absolutely out to lunch. But I think a bad lunch, by the way, if they're putting pineapple on pizza. But I think we should. I think culture should be the same. The worst thing that we can have in our culture is indifference. You know, because, man, indifference is where static, uh, just small playing happens. If I hate the culture, I'm out. Great, win for you, win for me. If I love the culture and the people that I get to do it with, oh man, what a win for everyone involved. But if I'm indifferent, oof, I'm not leaving and I'm not trying. I'm just floating. And that is the fastest path to death for anyone on the team and the team itself. And that's like, yeah, the opposite of a great culture to me is not a toxic culture. It's an indifferent culture. Man, that is not a good place to be.
Yeah, completely. I mean, you're just setting without a clear culture, you're not giving clear expectations, and you're not really setting anybody up for like, this is what we care about. These are the behaviors we want. This is what our purpose of being here is for. If that's not clear, then they're just coming in and floating,
Yep.
clocking in, clocking out. You can't get that upset if they're not really doing what you want them to do. Yeah, I like the different analogies of the styles because uh, there's just different ways of doing the same business, and they're all okay. Um, there's just a different style for each person in each company, and that doesn't mean all three can be successful and
And
do completely
and
different
each
things.
and each team within each company. I mean, you get a product development team whose sleeves are rolled up and expo markers are flying and whiteboards are just absolutely being abused. Or you get, an accounting team who is largely independent, could be anywhere. There can be calls, of course. But,
Mhm.
I think culture would vary, not just at the organizational level. I think it's at a team level too. Look, let's just take AT&T, for example. I remember I was in Mexico, I was in Oaxaca, and I walked down the road, and there was a AT&T store on the side of the road, right next to like papayas and pineapples. And I looked in there and it's like, oh, they're selling the same phones they are in Manhattan at the AT&T. But man, I gotta tell you, like, of course, the lives that the team lives, like values, differences, like everything was different. Um, and so to suggest that AT&T Oaxaca and Manhattan in, I don't know, Chelsea is it's entirely different. It's the same company, it's the same products, it's the same services, but it's an entirely different culture, because culture is well beyond the four walls that we work in, or wherever we can work.
Yeah, great point. And I like that you talked about, you said within the teams, there can be different cultures, and that's completely okay because of the different functions they do. But the term on the from like a geographical perspective, have you ever heard of the term La Terriere?
No, I
It's
don't think so.
it refers to food.
Okay.
Used a lot, I would say, with it can even be like cheese, but a lot of times with wine. But
Okay.
the idea is that the soil and the climate of where you live is going to make food taste different. So, grapes is one of the best examples based on where that is grown. Even though you're growing the same thing, it's different. It's unique to that area. And I like to look at culture from that standpoint. It's very important from where your soil's at. And so if you're a place that has, offices in different parts of the country, I could say, hey, it's really important that you understand what your employees in that community, what matters to them. And they're going to resonate to totally different things that are important to them than they are in a New York City, a Florida, small town, middle Midwest. And so that idea of, where you're located and understanding how that ties to the importance and what your employees care about also. So, want to dive in a little bit for a second on the rethink work. And, what is the main concept or what was the driving factor that said, I need to put this out. I want people to take this and I know it's going to impact them because of this.
There's like the honest answer, and then there's like the passionate answer. The honest answer is that I wrote it when I was 24, and I found it really hard to tell the world that I knew what I was talking about over and over and over again, and that the only way I could have myself validated and prove the concepts and the ideas that I was sharing with the world would be to write a long form piece that ended up being Rethink Work, and having major media outlets around North America tell people to give me a shot, which I was really grateful that they did. The headlines were very generous, Forbes and SiriusXM and lots of big media said, "Hey, you should give this guy a shot," which transformed my career, if I'm being totally honest. But the message behind the book, which I thought was one that was worth sharing, is that work, as I sort of mentioned earlier, work is what we do more than anything else in the day. Yet the way that we attract people and keep them in thought about work, and this is years ago now, it's certainly evolved since then, but the messaging is still important. Work is not something that we do from 9 to 5. It's a lifestyle. It is the way that we move through life. It's work is more than we spend more time working than we do sleeping. Like you said, we spend more time at work than we do with our family and our friends. And my take is that we should probably enjoy it. And enjoyment doesn't mean fun and pizza parties. It means being connected to the work that we get to do, the impact that it has, and the people that we get to do it with. And what Rethink Work is all about is it's a guide, it's a roadmap on how to tell that story differently, so that we can attract and keep the right people and build something that's worth building, that lasts, that has not just a positive impact on the work that we get to do, but the lives that we get to do it with. And it's a really optimistic message. It's an actionable message, and it's one that has carried me through the last bunch of years, helping some really great people and some really great teams do some really great work. I think the pandemic, accelerated a lot of the principles that we were talking about. I think this AI revolution that we're talking about accelerated a lot of these things. The differentiation of culture and how we work and where we work is more prominent now than it's ever been before. And I say, thank goodness. I think work was due for a reckoning, and I think we're kind of in the middle of that right now. And if I were to get my crystal ball out, I would say that we saw like great resignation and saw massive turnover and things like that in the pandemic. I don't think it's over. I think it's half over. But as workplaces, which is happening right now, everyone's calling people back to 4 or 5 days a week I think there's going to be another massive turnover on the horizon, and it's going to be short term very painful for a lot of organizations and a lot of people. Medium long term, though, I'm very optimistic because people will then find that job that they like to do with people they like to do it with, and in a style that suits them. Some people might love coming to the office 5 days a week. Who am I to say that's a bad practice? Some people may never want to go into an office again. Who am I to say that that's a bad practice? I think we will find equilibrium in the workforce that works for not all, but most people. And that finally, because I don't think we'll go back after that, finally, I think we'll be able to remove that negative connotation associated with work. And I'm excited for those days.
No, great point. Points, I should say. The, a question like loomed in my head while you're talking about that. You've been using this, teaching this, building off of this for years. And I liked how you said, the pandemic has made a shift. Now here we are, 6 years later, and there's a shift. But how much of the concepts here were true 10 years ago as they were 5 years ago in the middle of pandemic into right now?
I would argue everything is equally applicable and relevant now, but the mechanisms and the tools and the opportunities that we have make it a lot more possible. So when I wrote this book, Zoom wasn't even created yet. And AI, was a basketball player. He played for the 76ers, you know what I mean? It wasn't a technology. But because we have this knowledge of and the ability to work in different places than we did, like Starbucks was the second office at the time. I'm pretty sure this was like pre-WeWork or something like that too.
Yeah.
And the subsequent collapse of WeWork and everything that it's been such a roller coaster. And then AI, the tools that we can use now to tell the stories that I think are really important to differentiate our culture have just made the reality of differentiated workforce so much more possible than it ever was before. Before, I would have leaned more into like values and experience and things like that. Now I would lean into more like geography altogether, like say you're an absolute morning person and all you wanted to do was go surfing and golfing and you had the opportunity to take your family to, I don't know, Hawaii or something like that, work from 4 a.m. until 2 in the afternoon when the workday in the East is done. Actually, the workday would be done at noon if it's 5 hours behind New York. And then spend the afternoon with your family or something like that. Like these things are possible in ways that 10 years ago it just wasn't necessarily possible because Teams didn't exist and Zoom didn't exist. Like Skype was the primary technology, which wasn't, rapidly adopted to it. Like Slack maybe was just getting started. So the tools have made Rethink Work and the points in it so much more possible than ever before. And now we just have to figure out what AI means, where it's applicable. I think it's going to be a really fun but challenge, applying this stuff so that we can make it happen and do everything the book promises.
Building off of I don't want to just say AI, let's just say the future of work. If you're looking at, I want to prepare for the next 5 years for the future of work, what would be your advice?
My advice would be twofold. Number one, if I'm in a team of people that I'm working with right now, just to make sure that we've created a deep level of trust with each other so that we can do the number two thing, which is just keep taking swings. And I think people get this wrong with innovation, is that we have to hit these big moonshots to these big grand slams. I just don't see it that way. Like, yes, that's the result. But I would rather compound 100 small experiments that we test everything and analyze it along the way to get to the big win rather than like risking it all and putting it all on the line. That's not necessarily what I think would be the best way forward. So I would, yeah, deepen the quality relationships with the people that I've got in and outside of work, by the way, because the people outside of our work are to be our safety net, from our relationship standpoint. The people inside of work are going to give us the safety to take the swings that we need to take. And number two, keep swinging. I'm working on my second book right now. It'll be out early 2027. But I think three things need to happen, and I'm really going to be diving into this in the book. Number one, we have to map our certainty horizons. So what's our long-term destination that we want to get to? What's the medium-term milestone? And what's the thing I can do right now that will get me a little bit closer to that? Number two, I've got to ask, am I the person that the future demands of me? The answer is probably not. I have to become slightly something different than I am right now. And number three, what's the smallest shift I can take right now to be the person that ultimately needs to get this first step done so that I can identify if I'm moving in the right direction, if I'm the person I need to be, or if the goal itself has changed completely. I think if we can repeat that cycle with people that we love and trust along the way, regardless of the uncertainty that's in front of us, we should be able to navigate it this far.
That is great framework. I really love that idea. Do you, yeah, we'll have to talk again as it gets a little bit closer
Sure.
and it comes out.
We're just building everything out now. I'm really excited about this one. 2027 is going to be a really fun year.
Yeah, a lot of people are gonna, I wasn't even aware you're doing that, and a lot of people are gonna be interested in exactly that. Um, it's necessary. So, as I'm kind of wrapping up, I have one more question I guess I'd like to ask, and taking it, you've given, which I prefer, you've just given so many great ideas, things are relevant to a lot of people listening, especially, from a business case. If somebody was trying to decide though, like, hey, I'm looking to put on an event and I'm looking at your concepts that we've spoke on today, and they're going, well, but I also have these speakers over here and they speak on some similar things to that nature. Why should they go with you?
To me, it comes down to the experience, and I would say the memorability of the content. Here's the thing, Chris, you know this with the work you're doing. The way I see it, there are only like 7 things roughly that we can talk about. We can talk about sales, which I would include like marketing in there. We can talk about leadership, talk about the economy, talk about the future. You can talk about change, creativity, innovation. You just be a pure motivational or inspirational speaker. You can probably talk about government or future. Like, I don't think you can name a topic that doesn't fit under one of those 7 categories. So it makes it really hard for speakers to differentiate themselves in a very crowded market. There's like 100,000 of us all talking about one of those 7 things. What I really like though is to be a partner in this journey. And so, like, I'll give you an example. Today I had 2 calls with clients. One was an organization that's doing a value add event for their client. Their clients are primarily small businesses that can't afford necessarily to bring a big speaker in. So they are giving them exposure to thought leadership they wouldn't have had before. I'm going to lean into my small town Rocky Mountain Canadian roots and the work that we did when we first got this business started to be able to speak to these small businesses. I also, though, earlier today was talking to a Fortune 500 engineering firm who's bringing their 600 top performing sort of like President's Club leaders in the room. And the funny thing is they asked for the same talk. But I love to ask, my favorite question to ask them is like on a scale of Harvard to Hollywood. Harvard is very like academic, research-based, think trends, charts, graphs. Hollywood is very story-based, really fun. You might get laughs, you might get tears. It's all based on the same fundamental research, but delivered in a different way. I love to ask my clients, like, where do you see this on a 1 to 10 scale, and how can I make sure that this is an 11 out of 10 for you? And they will give me, like, the engineering firm, what do you think they said? They said probably like, 4, 4.5.
Yeah.
And the small business team, they said, give us like a 9, 9.5. Like, let's have a ton of fun. Like, let's get people laughing. Let's get people high fives. Like, let's have a blast. And so, having done this 500 or 600 times now, I think of my work as almost like a set list, and I'm always adding songs into the set list, or like a library, and I'm always adding books into the library. And depending on what the client's looking for, I get to go find new stories or new songs and add to the set list and build something that I know is proven before because I've said the essence of the message, but it's customized in that I get to bring a brand new flavor and taste in a way that the meeting planner knows that their audience is going to really resonate with the material. So the experience that you're going to get from me versus, look, there's so many wonderful, wonderful speakers out there with wonderfully unique stories. I would say the thing that sets me apart is that I get to actually build something that is going to really land with your audience, and I know it's going to be really fun to deliver.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to hear your response, but I'm not surprised at all with it. I just want to share with you and everyone listening this, it's good to get to hear and connect and to build something with the client to truly understand, because that event is so important that everyone's put together. But what speaks to me that louder than anything you're going to say about yourself is just what others say about you. And you have tons of amazing testimonials and references, but also the amount of other speakers and people that are in the industry that I have talked to that have told me nothing but amazing things and bring up your name all the time on how great you are is amazing. If there was a popular vote out there and we put it, I'm feeling pretty confident that you had a pretty good chance of getting a popular vote amongst your peers. So
Hey, that means a
that
ton,
speaks
man.
volumes.
I really appreciate that. I am so grateful for the work that I get to do every day. I'm so grateful for people like you in it that make the dream come true, man. Like without you, this would just be that. It would just be a dream, and the role that you play and the work that we get to do is I'm so grateful for it. It's everything I ever hoped for, and that much more. I'm grateful to be here in this.
Now, that shows in the work that you do, Eric, to say the least. And so, for everyone listening that wants a chance to learn more, on the links of the description, we'll have a link to a speaker profile, but more importantly, we'll have a link to Eric's website. You can learn a lot on there. You get more information. I'll send a link for Rethink Work, the book as well, and you connect with them on LinkedIn. So I want to wrap this up and say once again, thank you so much, Eric, for being on this session.
Wonderful time, and looking forward to keeping in touch.
Absolutely. Thank you.